All right, so of course you were just watching President Donald Trump there taking questions in the Oval Office amid a range of topics here. He ended with what's going on in space, talking about how Elon Musk is allegedly getting ready to go up and get Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, the two astronauts that have been stranded in space now for about 9 months. If you recall, they had only planned on going up there for about a week. They've been there for 9 months. This has become a talking point and a flashpoint in politics because Elon Musk has said that he wanted to get them earlier and that the Biden administration did not okay that. So the president was asked about that today. He said that's what he's heard, but he doesn't have any real information there. But again, it sounds like he will be going up to get them, and no longer do these two astronauts want to be stuck in this political game. They want to be home on Earth, and the president plans to greet them when that happens. Among the other headlines, of course, here, though, is the tariffs here. The president announcing a rollback on tariffs that are part of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, any goods that is compliant with those agreements. So he's going to roll back some of these tariffs from both Canada and Mexico. This, again, will be temporary. And there was a lot of talk looking forward now to April 2nd. There's an April 2nd deadline in which some more reciprocal tariffs will come into place. That's also when you'll see the steel and aluminum tariffs come into place as well. And so certainly the world is watching and the market is reacting to this, despite the president saying he's not really watching the market and that is not dictating his decisions here. It certainly is a factor in all of this. So for more, I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang, who's on the North Lawn, along with ABC's Elizabeth Schulze in our D.C. bureau. So, Elizabeth, really every day now, I know you've been paying close attention to the stock market here. It's been a bit volatile. There's been some tariff whiplash here today, and it seems as that closing bell rings that really all eyes are on the NASDAQ today.
Yeah, and it was another down day, really, if you look at the Dow, Kana, which is kind of the big benchmark index for stocks. A lot of red there. And even despite this temporary reprieve on tariffs, you can see they are down about 430 points, 1% on the Dow. The NASDAQ, you point out, that was a much heavier loss. And part of that there is that these big tech names that have been fueling the rally in the stock market are also now pulling back. What is the underlying concern here is growth in the economy. How much is the uncertainty over these policies, especially this back and forth, the whiplash lately over tariffs, and are they on, are they off? What does that mean for these big global corporations that are so reliant on trade and are trying to plan out their supply chains in the months and years to come? They're trying to make those investment decisions, and that's a lot harder to do when you're facing these headlines every couple of hours that could dramatically shift the kinds of business decisions that they have to make. So some of the traders who I talk to a lot say, look, we want to just know what is going on. What is the plan? This on-again, off-again strategy makes us uncertain about exactly what the outlook is for corporate profits. And then, of course, what this also comes down to, Kana, is the consumer, because we know that consumers power the American economy. If they are facing longer-term higher prices, that could be a headwind for economic growth. It means that they won't be spending as much. That trickles into companies' profit margins. So that's the uncertainty there. I do think it's notable that President Trump says he's not watching the stock market closely. He's looking at this longer-term plan, and we know that his reason, at least one of the reasons he says for these tariffs, is to try to encourage more American manufacturing, but that is no doubt something that would play out over the longer term.
Right. The short-term pain for the long-term gain is something that we hear over and over again from the president. And as Elizabeth continuously points out here, how much will this hurt Americans in the short term? How long can they hold out? But also, Selena, it's been really interesting to see how the leaders of both Canada and Mexico have been responding to all of this, especially today, where you hear from the president of Mexico saying, look, I had a respectful conversation with President Trump. And it seems the Trump administration would certainly view this tariff threat as a bit of a win today in the way it's playing out.
Well, I mean, look, all of this has been utter chaos and uncertainty, to Elizabeth's point. And you essentially have the president almost entirely rolling back the tariffs that he only put in place just a few days ago. This is about those executive orders he signed exempting those goods that are USMCA compliant. And experts tell me that that means the vast majority of goods coming from Canada and Mexico will get relief from these tariffs for 1 month. But then after that, everything's up in the air. Trump says that on April 2nd, he's going to be imposing reciprocal tariffs, which would have a sweeping impact, since this means the U.S. would match the duties that any country imposes on American products. So it's still unclear just how long this reprieve is going to last. But, Kana, you heard the president there in the Oval Office insisting that he's not making this change because of the stock market dips. He says that this is about other countries paying up their fair share, and administration officials are stressing that they're giving this temporary pause because they've seen progress in these countries to stem the flow of fentanyl through their borders into the United States. We've seen many different reasons for why this administration believes that tariffs are necessary, including, to your point, this short-term pain for long-term gain, bringing manufacturing back to the United States to curb the flow of fentanyl and to balance the trade imbalance between the U.S. and these other countries. Now, one official today also saying that a reason for this pause is following President Trump's conversations with the big three automakers. The administration saying that these car companies are promising to move more of their supply chains and manufacturing back to the United States. But experts say this isn't a process that takes 1 month. This is a process that plays out over the span of years, and it involves really big investment. So if these tariffs do come back in a month, it's really not going to help those automakers all that much.
Selena, I want to stick on the fentanyl issue with you for just 1 second, if we can, because throughout this conversation that you witnessed there in the Oval Office, certainly Canada and Mexico top of mind, but also China looming large here anytime you talk about tariffs and anytime that you talk about fentanyl, because the precursor chemicals come from China, they go to Mexico, they get turned into these pills, and then come into the United States. And so the president of Mexico is saying fentanyl seizures have been reduced by 41.5%. And Selena, as they were having this conversation there in the Oval Office, it sounds like the Senate is taking steps now to make sure that fentanyl will remain a Schedule I drug. It's temporarily classified that way, and that will expire at the end of the month here. So there are some serious steps being made here. How does that kind of reaction, what's the reaction there from China in terms of fentanyl, but also even TikTok came up in this conversation, Selena?
Yeah, we heard China mentioned several times there, and the president was also asked about the last time that he spoke with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He wasn't really clear on that, but he said he speaks often to the Chinese leader and that they have a good relationship. Now, when it comes to the fentanyl issue, this is something that the Biden administration had been working on as well. Remember that landmark APEC summit where President Biden sat down with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and they came up with an agreement for China to crack down on the makers of those precursor chemicals within their country. And before President Biden left office, officials within the National Security Council had told me that there was real progress being made there. But clearly, this is still a sticking point. Those 10% tariffs on China that President Trump recently slapped on the country, that comes on top of 10% tariffs he had put on earlier in his term. And of course, Trump also hitting China with further tariffs in his first administration.
Certainly. And Elizabeth, I'm hoping you can bring us up to speed here as well, especially with some of these reciprocal tariffs, because you heard the president talk about some products, in particular with Canada. He talked about milk and lumber, saying, you know what, we have enough lumber in the United States. He also talked about essentially cutting fire line, and he wants to free the forest here in the United States to harvest. So when he says things like that, how does that tip the scales here market-wise? And do you think we'll see a response from Canada there?
And it's an argument that makes sense to a lot of Americans, right? If we can produce these things domestically, why should we be relying on foreign trading partners to bring them in? But part of the complication there, Kana, and I can speak to an issue like eggs. We've been doing so much reporting on record high egg prices. Turns out the U.S. imports, of all the eggs that it imports, the most come from Canada. And you have to wonder, why would we be importing that many eggs from Canada? But think about the supply chains and think about the vastness of the United States. And northern states, a lot easier for them to get eggs from Canada than if you're going to try to reinvent the supply chain across the United States. So some of this just comes down to the logistics and the reality that this is how the trade system is currently built. That does not mean it couldn't be rebuilt, but as we've been saying, that's going to take time.
All right, Elizabeth and Selena, our thanks to both of you.